Hey, it's Soup here, and welcome to my 9.2 Frost Mage Rotation Commentary Guide. This video will be focusing on the aspects of Frost Mage that affect the rotation and what has changed in 9.2. There's a lot to cover, so let's get into it. First, I want to go over the 9.2 changes and the impact they've had on the Frost Mage rotation. Starting with the tier set, the 2-piece gives your Frost spells a 25% chance to proc a Comet Storm on your current target every 20 seconds, and the 4-piece causes Comet Storm to apply an 8-second debuff that increases damage dealt by 2%, stacking up to 5 times. The tier set has caused a couple changes to the Frost rotation. First, you can now take Comet Storm in single target, and the goal is to cast it directly after a flurry proc because the damage ticks from Comet Storm benefit from but do not consume Winter's Chill. This also applies to lining up flurry procs with the 2-piece Comet Storm proc when possible. Shattering Comet Storm this way is a large benefit to Icy Vein's uptime because Comet Storm contributes to Icy Propulsion cooldown reduction. The other change is you now want to line up Frost Nova with the 2-piece proc and AOE because it is a big burst of damage and massive Icy Vein's cooldown reduction. The next 9.2 change is the addition of double legendaries and alternate legendary builds for Frost. The Night Fae legendary causes targets hit by shifting power to give a 1% crit and haste buff up to 10% and allows you to channel shifting power while moving, which is a great quality of life change but doesn't have much of an impact on the rotation. The Necro Lord legendary Death's Fathom, however, has had a big impact on Frost. This legendary causes every Frostbolt you cast to give a stacking 1% spell damage buff with no cap during Deathborn, as well as a chance to proc 8 seconds of Deathborn every Frostbolt you cast. Additionally, because Deathborn causes Frostbolt to cleave hitting 3 total targets, you get 3% spell damage for every Frostbolt cast on 3+ targets. This interaction has also caused both the Slick Ice and Cold Front legendaries to be viable in AoE as Necro. And then the last legendary change is that Disciplinary Command has become viable in AoE as Night Fae. Which legendary you choose in AoE will depend on your Covenant and the content, but also largely on your personal preference, as there isn't really an objectively best build for Frost this tier. The last major change to the Frost rotation was the 9.2 nerfs. The damage of Frozen Orb and Blizzard was reduced by 12%, and the Frozen Orb cooldown reduction from Blizzard was reduced by 50%. These nerfs only impact the AoE rotation priorities, which I'll get into later. Alright, moving on to the rotation. Instead of giving a play-by-play commentary, I want to highlight specific aspects of the rotation to be aware of. Starting with single target. The addition of Comet Storm means that you want to line up flurry procs with both the tier proc and the spell whenever possible. This can mean very briefly pooling a flurry proc when Comet Storm is coming back up, or casting Frostbolt between Ice Lances after a flurry proc to allow some time for a Comet Storm proc to land, as seen here. Aside from managing Comet Storm, the single target rotation hasn't changed in 9.2. Next up is the AoE rotation. This is where the 9.2 changes have been felt the most. The AoE priority for Blizzard is now at 3+ targets or 2+ targets with Freezing Rain, meaning you no longer cast Freezing Rain Blizzards on single target. Then during Deathborn as Necro, you don't cast Blizzard until 6+ targets or 5+ targets with Freezing Rain. During Deathborn, you also ignore Ice Lance at 3+ targets. One important thing I want to highlight about the Necro AoE rotation is that you want to use flurry procs as soon as they come up to avoid losing procs. So the best way to get full value from them is to swap targets to cast a second flurry, as seen here, because Frostbolt Cleave will consume the Winter's Chill stacks. The reason it's important not to waste flurry procs is because they generate an icicle, cast 3 bolts, and apply Winter's Chill, meaning each flurry proc is 6 potential crits worth of Icy Vein's cooldown reduction. The last thing to highlight is just how much Icy Vein's cooldown reduction you get from lining up Frost Nova with the 2-piece Comet Storm procs. You can see in this clip that shattering Comet Storm on 4 targets reduced the Icy Vein's cooldown by about 40 seconds. Here is footage of the Necro AoE rotation while I go over AoE legendary and Covenant choice. When it comes to choosing a legendary in AoE, it makes the most sense to me to pick based on the content. As Night Fae, Freezing Winds makes more sense in lower trash density dungeons where you'd take Splitting Ice, and DC for larger AoE dungeons. Similarly as Necro, Slick Ice is really versatile but makes sense in low trash density dungeons or on Tyrannical, with Cold Front being the large AoE focused choice. Given the options, it's best to try different builds out and see how you like them. For choosing between Night Fae and Necro Lord, I think Deathborn ramp value is the best indicator to follow. Lower keys or less coordinated pugs will make Deathborn harder to get full value from because so much of the damage comes from the backloaded spell damage buff. Similarly to Legendaries, your best bet is to try each Covenant out and see what you like and what works best for the content you're playing. playing. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to let me know in the comments, and remember, never stop improving. Peace!